So now I will turn it over to Stephanie Hussey, RBFF State R3 Program Director, to start things off.
Thank you, Joanne. In 2015, RBFF partnered with the Aquatic Resources Education Association to develop recommendations and strategic tools to enable state and federal agencies, non-governmental organizations, and fishing and boating industry to improve the effectiveness of angler R3 efforts. This work was developed with the Wildlife Management Institute and leveraged the work Matt Dunphy's done with the hunting and shooting sports R3 efforts. This work also built upon the foundation from our best practices workbook for boating, fishing, and aquatic resources stewardship education. This project work was developed with an Angler R3 state agency working group. This working group, made up of the individuals on the slide, is made up of education and marketing staff from 10 different state fish and wildlife agencies. And these folks were really instrumental in the process of developing the work and the recommendations, and we are indebted for their time into this project. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt Dunphy, Programs Manager at the Wildlife Management Institute, to talk about the project work with the working group and the recommendations more specifically.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, everybody that's on this call for tuning in to listening a little bit about R3 and what we've learned. So we're going to keep this informal. I'm going to try to give you the most important stuff. There was a lot of stuff developed, but you're all busy people and also very intelligent people. Therefore, let's talk about the critical things that you can hopefully start to learn from. And I guess more importantly, I'd like to give you the context of the kind of problem we're talking about, so that when you reference the document, like the recommendations for Angler R3 document or the other great resources that RBFF has out there, you'll know better about what we're talking about and hopefully can utilize that information more within your state and begin joining the, as someone said, the R3 Army, and actually start moving the needle on creating more angling participants. So let's start at the beginning. What is R3? I like to start here because I can tell you some really funny stories about at the end of one of these seminars or workshops, someone raised their hand and say, wow, let's focus on archery. So I'm not saying archery, I am saying R3. Why did we need an acronym? It's fairly simple, because we have been lackadaisical in our approach to this, honestly, in the past 30 years, and we have tried to take this whole thing and think about recruiting outdoor participants in singularities rather than the process it is. The 3 R's stand for different phases that people go through, and therefore the different needs for our programs that need to be encompassed into an R3 effort. Recruitment is different than retention. Those are two different steps in the process of becoming an angler or an outdoor participant, and are, again, unique from reactivation. So what I want you to put in your minds right now is we're talking about a process. That's why this work was critical. That's why we need a change in our fundamental thinking about this, because this isn't an event. Making an angler isn't as simple as just inviting somebody to one event. It's not just simple as making a youth fishing day. Those things are discrete points within a process, and frankly what we've learned is that we haven't been paying much attention to the whole process. Therefore, there's lots of holes in it. Therefore, we're missing out on the audiences that want to participate, and we're not servicing those folks who currently are in a way that will keep them participating in the future. Okay, so that's a little bit about the problem. Well, how do you fix it? Well, this was a point of frustration for me many years ago when I started working on this on the hunting and shooting sports side, is that we weren't strategic about this. We weren't thinking about a process. We were doing stuff. Now, mind you, good stuff. It was just stuff, and it wasn't really coordinated. And no matter who I asked in those early days, why are you doing this? They would say, well, because we think it's the right thing. And I would ask, well, is it making an impact? And they'd say, well, we're not sure, but we sure hope so. So this project represents a stop in that kind of thinking and incorporates some logical strategic steps. Number one, what do we need to do? Well, let's first identify all of the threats or the problems facing the decline in outdoor participation. More specifically, facing an individual who wants to get involved. There's barriers there. We need to know what those are. Number two, we need to get all of our community, and I mean the stakeholders, the big three I call them, industry, agencies, and NGOs, moving down the road in the same direction, not overlapping each other, because we each have unique resources and unique talents, but aligning ourselves so we're all moving in the same direction. Once we know that, we can actually identify strategies that address the problems, then, and only then, do we take action. So this is a little bit of strategic thinking here, and I'm not going to spend more time on it than this. Basically, it's just this, folks. Find what your problems are, recruit the people that can help you and that are interested in fixing those problems, and then do stuff that addresses the specific problems, not just stuff that I think is important or you think is important, the stuff that our potential participants know are important. And I can guarantee you, the barriers that they have are different than what we perceive them as. So that's the process. So what did we do in this project that Stephanie introduced you to, and I'm going to share with you today? Basically 3 things. Number 1, we identified those problems. We spent a lot of time doing it. I won't bore you with what they are. You can look them up. But we started from the perspective of what are the problems. Then when we found the problems, we started working with more people. The incorporation of that work group that Steph talked about, the expertise around the country and all their perspectives. If these are the problems, then we as all of these stakeholders need to address these specifically and figure out our roles in each of those. And I'm comfortable saying we got that alignment. Industry, agencies, NGOs are coming online now like they never have before and recognizing no single one of us can solve this R3 thing. We all have to solve it collectively because we've all got different parts in that process that we can impact. If you were to summarize the whole project, in general, what we've done is we've identified the strategies that address the problems that we found and prioritized them. Okay, now this is an important part. We did not identify strategies for all the problems. That would be an insanely long document, and I'm not sure anybody needs to go through that right now. That's one reason. The second reason is we were also interested in what do we need to do now? You know, as a community or even as an individual organization, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So, in cracking this R3 nut, what do we have to do first? That's what I want to share with you. There's a handful of these prioritized strategies that we need to think about and start implementing right away. So, let me get specific with what those things are. Again, these aren't all the these aren't strategies that address all the problems. These are just the ones that that working group and the community that we've listened to over the past year have told us these are the real roadblocks to our community implementing R3 down the road. This is the stuff we need to get going now so that we can start making headway down the road. Okay, now, here's how this is going to go. Up in the right-hand corner, I'm going to put what the actual recommendation is, okay? But I don't care about it because it's kind of boring and we had to write them sort of jargony. I want to tell you really what this means. So focus on the middle part of the slide here. You can read the actual recommendation later. So recommendation number 1 in this document. Basically, we need to have a way to think about R3. Now, if that doesn't make sense, that's because it's a fairly fuzzy way to say it, but it basically means this. We as a community haven't been approaching R3 with that process mindset. A lot of you have seen iterations of this model. This isn't a new model. This isn't anything that was invented by me or our group. This basically is the fundamental principle behind marketing. The roots of this model go back to the 1960s. To a model called the Diffusion of Innovations, which is the Diffusion of Innovations model, which has been pretty widely accepted as the founding of modern marketing theory. Why? Because what it does is it represents the steps people go through in accepting a new idea, a new activity, or sometimes even a new innovation, a new technology. Marketing works because it targets the steps people are at, or more specifically, it targets how do you move people from one stage to the next. If someone is interested in fishing, how do you get them from being interested to trying it. Once they try it, how do you get them to make the decision to do it again? Once they decide to do it again, what do they need to continue learning how? What support do they need to continue doing it over time so that our effort doesn't end in giving somebody one individual experience and then leaving them for the rest of their life? Okay, so as a community, this model right here that we call the outdoor recreation adoption model, we have to be thinking about our efforts in relation to this process. If we do that, we start to notice why one-day fishing events don't necessarily work. We start to, or they don't work in and of themselves, but they have to be part of something bigger. It helps us understand how different groups, where they're at and what they might need. So we as a community, what this recommendation is saying, is we need to use this to not only think about the problem, but map our efforts onto it. So if we take that model I just showed you and we stretch it out a little bit, and by the way, this is an image directly from the recommendations document, we can look at the type of R3 efforts that we're doing, and we can map them, quote unquote, onto the process of adoption that a person may be going through. This allows us to identify holes. Notice, like on the reactivation side, there's not much over there because we haven't been doing much over there. Notice on the retention side, we have a lot of things that kind of are on the front end of retention, on the back side of retention. This helps explain why we have such a retention problem in angling. Over half of the people who try it lapse out of it. Okay, so it means we got them to the trial, but then they stopped. Largely what we're finding is because we haven't been giving them the resources they needed to keep going forward because we haven't been thinking about the process. Okay, number 2. Again, this is real high-level stuff, so stay with me. We're going to hit the main points. Again, I want you to understand the perspective that we're coming at this from. Okay, what this means, you got to get your house in order. Probably the number one threat to good R3 right now is our lack of being able to implement good R3 programs. To do that, if you're an agency, and I know there are a lot of agencies on this call, particularly if you're an agency, but also if you're if you work for the industry or the NGO or an NGO, you're going to need some basic things to be able to do R3. Number 1, I hate to say this, but you're going to need a staff person. And this isn't just me recommending it. We have learned this over the past 5 years with state fish and wildlife agencies that are starting to work on R3. They're recognizing this can't be done by committee. In the last year, we have seen a huge amount of hirings of specific R3 coordinator staff within agencies. And let me tell you, I promise you, all of the states that are having the most impact in producing the most innovations on R3 are those states who have hired a person, largely because R3 touches all aspects of an agency. It targets marketing, communication, education, licensing system, species allocation, bag limits, all of that stuff. Plus, all of the external partners, the industries or NGOs that might want to partner with you. That means you need a hub, a person who can handle that. Secondarily, you need that person to have some expertise. The best person for R3 is someone who knows about marketing, someone who knows about communication, someone who's fairly innovative and understands agency culture. Third, this is a big one, folks, particularly for state fish and wildlife agencies. We need systems that can track customers. I know a lot of you have heard this, but I'm going to say it again. The fact that we cannot track an individual through their license purchasing history, or more accurately, that we can't give an individual a unique identifier before they buy a license and then track them through their first license purchase and down the road, that is a no-go for R3, because licenses are the indicator. Excuse me, let me put it this way. License purchases are the indicator that people are changing their behavior. If we don't link our efforts to people's behavior changes, we're not doing anything. So we've got to get our databases online to be able to track customer involvement, track customer engagement over time. Those things are starting. There's lots of good models that are out there, but this is really where a lot of folks are focusing efforts within agencies right now, because this is a big hurdle. Okay, number 3. We got to focus on the real problems, not just do the easy stuff. As a group, when we looked at a lot of the programs that are currently being conducted within R3 stakeholders, what we found overwhelmingly is that we have a lot of programs that focus on the very early part of that adoption process. Because they're easy. It's easy to just stock a bunch of fish. It's easy to just have a youth fishing day or a fishing clinic. It's a lot harder to then take someone and link them up with additional resources that they need. So the point is, no longer can this be how we approach this. We have a strategic plan that's called doing things. Nope, we can't do that anymore. We can't just do stuff. We have to think critically about what we're doing and not be afraid to take some of the work that we're doing maybe on the early interest awareness side and reallocate that to the retention side so that we have a landing place, or maybe we extend, a better way to say it is we extend the path for people to walk down to becoming lifelong anglers. That's the goal here, folks. We're not trying to get people who buy a license once or twice in their lifetime. We want people who are fishing every year, buying equipment, getting out there with their families, overcoming nature deficit disorder. That's what we want. We strategically have to build our efforts to do that, not just keep doing a bunch of stuff that we think is important or easy. All right, we're rolling right along here. Number 4, basically, hopefully, well, at this point, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot of stuff this dude's talking about. And you're right. I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. This is hard. That's why it hasn't been done before. If this was easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation and our angling numbers would be an all-time high. But it's not, because this process is too big for one organization. Let me say it like this. Angling, like a lot of other outdoor activities, is a mentorship process. It is almost like apprenticeship. If you look at how your most avid anglers get involved with angling, and it's true for hunters, by the way, you will find to the vast majority of the times, those individuals have somebody or somebodies who take them out and mentor them and work them through that apprenticeship process of padded failures. What we're trying to do here, y'all, is be an artificial surrogate for that process. That's why this is hard. We have to anticipate what people need, provide what they need, and always, always, always make sure they have next steps. I've done this thing, now what? They always have something in front of them that lets them know, here's the next step you need to take, and here's who's going to help you. Okay? So, it's too big for one organization. When you look at that whole process, realize you not only cannot do it all, but you have specialties. If you're an agency, maybe you're really good over here on the recruitment side, so you need to engage a partner with you to take people from your basic angling skills training with fishing and invite them out again. Pass them on to a partner organization. Maybe after that, industry comes in with some self-learning tools that teaches them how to use different gear, maybe has an app, maybe has a map or an online ocean of content where people can go to teach themselves and learn. Linking our efforts between organizations will help us move people down this path so that one agency or one industry isn't in charge of doing that whole process. Let's not do everything. Do what you're good at and make sure you've got a partner that you can pass your cohort of people on to so that they always, always have a next step to go down toward the goal of being a lifelong angler. Okay, 5. Maybe some of you heard me preach about this one before. I'm a wildlife biologist by training, so I think in terms of outcomes. If I'm going to do a habitat treatment, I'm going to measure the amount of wildlife in that habitat before, and then I'm going to measure the amount of wildlife in the habitat afterwards. And if I have more wildlife, boom, it worked. If I have less or no change, it didn't work. We, as a culture, have not held ourselves to that rigor. We have, by far, if you look at the type of programs and the data that comes out of the R3 programs that we've been doing, we focus on outputs. How many people showed up? How many people said they had a good time? I'm sorry, that is not an outcome. Our goal is not to make happy people. Well, we like to make happy people, but the reason we want to make happy people is so that they keep doing it. If it's, by definition, if it's an R3 program, it has to recruit, retain, or reactivate. That means the person has to go fishing more or start fishing new. We have to start holding ourselves to that rigor. These two things right here, this is simple, folks. These are the only two ultimate outcomes of any R3 program. They have to achieve one of these two things, a new angler or a more active angler. Now, this is where it can get a little bit uncomfortable because outdoor education, we don't even have to target aquatic education here. Conservation education has a different goal. Conservation education, the goal is to hopefully change people's behavior, but we measure things like how interested they are in the outdoors, how much more they appreciate the outdoors, how much more they're comfortable in the outdoors, how much more they've learned, things like that. But if our programs end there, but the person never goes fishing, then that is an outdoor or aquatic education program. It is not an effective R3 program. So this is going to be an uncomfortable transition, but we've got to make it. We have to measure their behavior. Did they go fishing? Now, the good news here is that we have license sales that give us an indicator of that behavior change, so let's use them. That's why I emphasize we need our databases in line. Because if 50 people go through your R3 program, a year later, you better be able to tell me how many of those 50 people purchased a license. That way you can justify that, hey, my program is not only making people aware of water quality issues and environmental protection, I'm also making anglers. Brand new people that were never in the database before. That is an R3 program. Okay, we're getting near the end here, so hang in there with us. We have pigeonholed ourselves. By we, I mean stakeholders in just the outdoor world. We siloed ourselves. We are hunters, or we are anglers, or we are shooting sports participants. There has been a shift in society, everybody. You heard it here first, although I'm sure you haven't heard it here first. You've heard it elsewhere. New audiences, particularly young adults or just regular adults, however you choose to break that down, they're not thinking of themselves in silos anymore. Silos were their fathers' and grandfathers' way of thinking about things. I am this or I am that. These new folks are not that. They don't think of themselves as just anglers. They're, I like this term, outdoor sapiens. We're finding more anecdotal evidence that folks that get engaged say, oh, you know, this is amazing because this plays into what I'm already doing. I already love canoeing. I already love hiking. I already love mountain biking. Now I have one more amazing thing I can do outside. And oh, by the way, I can actually eat sustainably doing this. But if we tell them you're just this kind of a thing, they're probably going to say, well, that was, my parents were that way, but that's not who I am. Okay, that's point number one here. Point number two is that we can help each other. People who learn how to go fishing are probably, I'd say more than probably, have a higher probability of becoming hunters. Because guess what, folks? It's easier to become an angler than it is a hunter. I got no problem saying that. It's easy. The gear is easy, it's cheaper, and there's way fewer skills. So you know what? If you're a state fish and wildlife agency and you want to make hunters, here's my recommendation to you. Don't start them hunting. Start them fishing. And then, here's where partnership comes in. Then you ask them afterwards, hey, as the next steps, would you like to go farther? Would you like to learn how to shoot a bow or a .22 and then maybe consider hunting? And then pass them off to another program, another organization, or groups like the National Wild Turkey Federation, who right now are begging agencies to give them participants because they're totally revamping their programs. They want adults. They want college kids. They want to take people who've just learned how to go fishing and then teach them how to go turkey hunting. Let's start realizing that the world sees these, or people in the world see themselves not in these silos anymore. So let's leverage all of our partnerships. Let's go all the way across the aisle and make these very diverse outdoor users. Think about it like a stock portfolio. You could make a bunch of anglers Or you could make a bunch of hunt anglers, people that if they don't draw a tag for a deer in the fall, well, they're going to go fishing anyhow. That's a much more robust outdoor user that is going to help fund conservation and be advocates for the activities going forward. Okay, final. This sort of ties in a lot of what we've talked about. How do you affect change, the type of change that I have preached at you, and I'm a little preachy today, but I've been this way for the past year. It's chronic, and I'm not sure it's going to change. So apologies to everybody, but this is just the way it is. I really believe in this stuff, and I think we're really close to moving the needle. So I hope you can get passionate too. But back to the slide here. How do you impact change like this? Well, it's where we put our effort and our money. We have to be disciplined in our approach. We also have to be disciplined in where we choose to put our efforts. So whether you're the Cabela's Outdoor Fund, whether you're a local sportsman or angling group that funds programs or does programs, or you're an industry or academia that wants to do research, let's start doing research programs and directing money toward the actual threats. Remember, all the way at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about we define all the threats to angling. We've got that in this document now. We know what they are. These are the most important ones. And a lot of them, unfortunately, have gaping holes of knowledge. We know that it's a threat, but we don't know what to do about it because we haven't been addressing the real problems. We've been addressing the easy ones. We focus largely on outdoor education. We have assumed, and this isn't just angling, by the way, this is angling, hunting, shooting sports, trapping. We have assumed that if we just teach people about the outdoors, they'll take it from there. I'm here to tell you there is zero research on a large scale that shows that's true. As a matter of fact, we have more research that shows if you just get people aware and interested, they desert the activity at a much higher frequency. We have to recognize that outdoor education is maybe a good step, and not maybe, it is a good step, but it's not the end of the road. We need to make sure we understand the problems, and we are funding research and pilots that help us how to figure out the other problems that are facing these individuals once they build an outdoor appreciation. Okay, and finally, after this rapid diatribe at you, let me leave you with I think, marching orders for all of us, said by my very good friend and fellow archery warrior, Jeff Rawlinson. We should work as if the future of fishing, hunting, and shooting sports depends on it, because it does. A lot of you folks know the numbers. It's not a real rosy picture in the next 10 years, not for any of these activities. That's why we're mobilizing now. Honestly, I think we're about 10 to 15 years away from another big dip. There's data that supports it. We haven't shown it here, but it's out there. We know that the decline that we've been seeing or have seen on the outdoor recreation side is kind of set to take another big dip when the boomers hit a certain age. This is the time that we've got to start doing this. Now, the hope is, I'll leave you with the hope because I really truly believe this, if we take these recommendations at heart, if we actually change our agencies, our industries, our NGOs to engage new publics, to understand what their barriers are, know where they're coming from, and address those things specifically, I absolutely believe we can change this. People want to stay in the outdoors. They want to do this stuff. They want to live locally. They want to live sustainably. All we've got to do is make sure they understand we're comfortable with their values, and we know it's important to them, and we have got the roadmap that they need to get to the point of being the ultimate outdoor sapient. With that, I will turn it back to Steph to talk about next steps, and thank you guys for your attention. Steph, back to you.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much for going through all that. And as Matt said, the overall goal with the Angler R3 recommendations is to enable stakeholders to really take a look at their Angler R3 efforts and take a look at the gaps to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of not only our individual but our collective work overall. And as part of our next steps after putting out the recommendations, a couple of things that RBFF is moving forward with that we want to make you all aware of As one of the things we learned is that we needed a better idea of the angler R3 efforts that are occurring nationally. And so currently we're conducting a survey of state agencies to assess the level of angler R3 efforts that are happening in their states, the evaluation, and the resources and capacity that are generally allocated toward angler R3. And I want to thank many of you on the phone today that are joined with us that helped in completing that survey. And we're right now just trying to wrap up that survey, and so there'll be more information coming down the road in what we learned from that survey results. Another next step and another part of our work in working with Matt and WMI is to work with a national advisory group that is made up of state and federal agencies, fishing and boating industry, and NGOs to more specifically identify roles for all stakeholder groups. Something we're going to take a look at is developing checklists that provide a little more tactical approach for each stakeholder group. So these checklists will focus on the key roles for each stakeholder segment to really leverage their assets and what those areas of R3 focus may be that best suits their expertise. And so we're looking at developing different checklists, whether that's for state agencies, federal agencies, NGOs, and the fishing and boating industry. And those will be developed in the coming months, so stay tuned for more information from us in the future. And overall, our goal is to collectively focus on effective R3 efforts toward achieving 60 million anglers in 60 months. And thank you very much for joining us today.